It all starts with the first question, though. You know what I mean? Do you even need investors? You'd be surprised. Like, your family would sue you. Your family, your friends, your colleagues, they will take you to court. Like, they would do that. Because everything goes out the window when money's involved, right? So all the cutesy stuff, you think y'all really tight and close until like a lot of dollars on the line, then it's like, hey, no, we gonna get my money back. What's going on, everybody? My name is Q, aka The People's Planner, and welcome back to another episode of the People's Planners podcast. Brought to you by the Clever Group. I know it's been a minute, but finally got things back up and running. Looking to get more consistent here, but glad to be back. I hope y'all miss me. So as we kind of kick off, this episode, this one's going to be on a big one that I think over the last few weeks and months, just kind of been understanding more about the industry. But this one is just, navigating the funding landscape. As an entrepreneur, as a startup founder, being able to understand the different options you have when it comes down to raising money, if you even need to raise money, I think is a big goddamn deal. And it gets confusing, especially talking to different investors and different funders in different aspects, whether it's grants, investing, banks. I think it's important to know the different avenues that you can possibly go down and find the right one that fits what you're trying to do and how you're trying to grow your business, right? I think that's critical. But as we got to dive into this episode, I want to make sure, take my time to kind of walk through those steps with you guys. So, that way you be more prepared and understand more terminology. But to kick this off, there's so many different areas, I guess you can say, of raising money that you can go down, so many different options. And I'm going to list out the main 5 or 6 of them, which is 1, bootstrapping. This is pretty much doing it on your own. When you start your own business and grow your own business, ideally bootstrapping is when you use your own funds, whether it's savings, whether it's the revenue that's generated from the business, the little amount that you kind of have. But at this point, bootstrapping is all about being resourceful and stretching every dollar possible until you get to that level of, or profit. There we go. Profitable enough to where you can kind of self-sustain, but also have some traction to show towards investors, banks, that you actually been making money from doing what you've been doing. The biggest advantage of this is that you are completely in control of your business, right? So being bootstrapping, this is your money, this is your sweat, your tears, it's all of everything that you have being thrown at this. But it does take a toll on you because it can limit your growth potential due to the restricted amount of capital you might have access to. Typically going through the bootstrapping phase is also where it's a little bit tougher because when you're trying to expand and rapidly grow, especially in an industry that might be, constantly changing all the time, bootstrapping is a part to start, is an area to start in, but not necessarily stay in. So being able to leverage that and use, your bootstrapping ventures to eventually move on into another round of funding, whether, once again, if it's a bank, if it's going towards investors. Another option, the second thing is really the friends and families, right? This is really what they call like the friends, family, and fools raise. So this is pretty much, once again, you still have an idea, you have a little bit of money, revenue coming in from whatever you're doing within your business. But this friends, family, and food kind of area, this fundraising round is typically involves raising money from the people that are close to you, right? Your family, your friends, colleagues, members, teammates, whatever it is. So just being able to ask them for money, get them to believe into your idea, get them to buy into your idea, and hopefully get some type of investments, right? So typically, you don't really see huge amounts of family and family, friends, and fools raising. So I mean, the most I've heard someone actually get was like maybe $50,000 to $100,000 you get from this, but that's very rare. So I mean, on average, you're probably getting $5,000 to $10,000 from your, the people that are close to you. The biggest, I guess, advantage to this is that it's easier to kind of secure than traditional funding, because really this is I want to say easier. It's not easy. It's just a little bit easier than traditional funding sources, because these are people that already know you. They if you get them to believe in what you're doing enough, I mean, it's already going to be easy enough for them to just say, hey, look, I'll write this check. Hey, look, I'd love to be a part of it. I want to help you out. So, a lot of people out there are willing to help. But the biggest restraint, I guess, the biggest hesitation of the friends, family, and foods raise is that it can strain all relationships, right? This is where the personal relationships can be very strained with people that are very close to you, especially if shit don't go as planned, right? So being able to understand the ins and outs of like what the dynamics is when it comes down to this, because this is where oftentimes like if things don't go as planned, I think it's a communication thing. That's when this whole round of fundraising can be detrimental, not only to your business, but also to just the relationship you have with, family, friends, colleagues, and things of that nature. But also to, like, in this space is where it kind of gets wonky because, you'd be surprised. Like, your family would sue you. Your family, your friends, your colleagues, like, they will take you to court. Like, they would do that. Because everything goes out the window when money's involved, right? So all the cutesy stuff, you think y'all really tight and close until, like, a lot of dollars on the line, then it's like, hey, no, we're going to get my money back, right? So, but if you can kind of make it through those first two, the bootstrap and family and friends round, like if you can make it through those two, you're kind of in the ideal area where you kind of want to be, because now that you have at least somebody that's invested in you, somebody that believes in you, somebody that sees you, you can kind of use that to leverage a little bit and to generate some revenue for yourself to at least make your business look a little bit more attractive in a sense. Because when you go into the next area of fundraising, this is where you get to those angel investors, right? These are the people who are individuals who provide capital for startups, right? And these are oftentimes folks who, whether they have just an influx of cash in a specific industry they're interested in, like they just have a lot of money, high net worth individuals. It can be also some former startups, some former founders like yourself who understand what it's like to go through this, and for them to give back, whether they had an exit, whether they're just, still running a business, for them to give back, the idea is just to invest, right? Invest in companies that are going through the same stuff that they went through. It's more of a pay it forward type group, right? So lots of times these are very wealthy folks. The biggest pros to these is they can offer more than just the capital. A lot of times you get a lot of mentorship and connections with these folks, but you may have to give up a significant equity stake, right? Because at some points, like, these angel investors are individuals that probably have some knowledge, right? In whatever space you're probably in. They might not only just have money, but like some connections, some resources, just things of that nature that can be very beneficial to what you're trying to do and what you're trying to build, which I think that value in itself can be astronomical, right? So being able to leverage that angel investing round, I think, is critical from mainly, I think, the resource and mentorship aspect, because it's a one-on-one thing. It's individuals who operate in that space. I'm a big fan of angel investing. But that kind of helps you lead into the venture capital world. So the VC world is a world that I currently work in, being able to work with founders, connecting them with investors in this aspect. So the VC world is really a pool of those angel investors, you can say, a pool of those into one, I guess, bucket. So venture capital fund is what all of the things get pooled into. So instead of one person investing directly into you, they would invest into this bucket, right? So you got 20 people into this bucket, which is managed by a venture capital firm. And the idea behind the VC firm is to deploy that same capital to you and different other companies that might, potentially be great companies to invest in. The biggest thing too is understanding that, when it comes down to investing in general or looking for investors, what they expect, right? These people are trying to get their money back. They understand that there's risk involved, but they're not just giving you a donation here. So they actually want you to like make some money back for them. You become somebody that they look towards to say, hey, look, I believe you can make my money back, and probably 10x it, right? Because they could have did anything else with the same dollars. They could have brought it somewhere else. They could have had invested it in other places and things of that nature. But just understanding that, I think, takes you a long way, because most founders, most of y'all really forget it. I understand how it goes, but most of y'all really forget to put yourselves in their shoes to understand, the dynamics about what investors are believing in. But the biggest pro to this is that this can bring a significant amount of funding and also strategic support across the board, because most VCs, it depends on the stage, right? We're going to talk about that later. You got pre-seed, seed, series A, B, C, all of those numbers going down. But it depending on the phase that you're in, this can provide you with a significant amount of funds to scale your business, expand your business, to do what you need to do to continue to put yourself on that growth trajectory. Typically within this round, I've seen, from 75, 50,000 all the way up to about $1 million in the VC world, depending on what area of the I guess, country you're in, United States, whatever. I know a lot of global stuff, but I'm not huge in the global space. But just knowing how the United States is, depending on what side that you're on, typically the West and California and New York and Northeast, those are the pretty heavy hitters when it comes down to VCs. They're going to throw millions of dollars at you in those startup phases. But more in the South, you kind of get some of those very rarely, but I know for sure you get a big bunch of those 250s, those $50,000 ranges. You can very rarely get up to that $1 million range, but just on average, VCs can provide way more funding than just one person because it's multiple people inside of a fund. The drawback to that is almost as similar, right? They expect a higher rate of return. They expect like a higher part of your company, but also a more significant influence on your company. So they'll be able to add more voices, or I guess a decent amount of voices to vote and help you make decisions on certain aspects, because they're going to be way more capital involved into funding your company, that there's going to be a lot of money on the line, and they're probably going to want to make sure you're doing the best possible thing you could do to continue to grow your company, but also position yourself to make them their money back, right? Because at the end of the day, it all really comes down to, can you make me my money back, right? And I think leaving that on the table, bringing that out, like, the elephant in the room, addressing that way beforehand, I think is crucial. So that's a big component to that. Another interesting area that I think a lot of folks don't really jump into enough is the crowdfunding space. So really what crowdfunding is really raising a bunch of money, but using online platforms like Kickstarter and Indiegogo. It's almost like GoFundMe, but that's like donations, right? But it's GoFundMe, but for equity in raising, right? So you're raising money through that. And it's a great way to just start building a customer base early, because you can really raise a lot of money using crowdfunding. And most people don't take advantage of crowdfunding as much as they should, because VCs is sexy. The whole sexy component of raising capital, getting the venture capital, getting investors, and all the other stuff sounds good. But taking advantage of crowdfunding can really de-risk a lot of investors when they do come, with a VC check, stuff like that, because they see that other people were invested in you. Like, that's one thing to understand about this world, is that people want to see other folks invest in you before they do, especially at that big of a level. And crowdfunding is a great place to start, because you can really raise small amounts of money from folks on these platforms, and at some point get yourself to a position to raising a big amount, right? I know a lot of companies can raise millions of dollars using Kickstarter, right? Using the same crowdfunding platform. I just think it's an area that's not being very used as much, but it really does require, like, a drawback to it is that it does require a very strong marketing effort, right? You really have to position yourself and market yourself of why people should be investing in you using crowdfunding. So it does take its toll. The fees and stuff that come with hosting your things on Kickstarter can be also a big thing too, but it requires you to really put yourself out there. And as a founder, that shouldn't be as big of a deal, because if you already putting yourself in a position, then crowdfunding is crucial, and it could be something that you should definitely look into and taking advantage of. You know what I mean? Bank loans and lines of credit is one of the, I guess, getting out of the equity world, jumping into more of the lending world. This is also a crucial one. Traditional bank loans, lines of credit really it plays a very, very great part in this, because the difference between the two is that it must be repaid with interest over a period of time, but you're not really giving up a percentage of your company, right? Now, if you default on it and you don't pay it back, of course, you can fight. There's going to be, some legal implications that's going to require you to do something, or they're going to take majority of your business, if not all of it. But being able to understand that they don't require like giving up equity, but you would have to have a solid credit history. This is where your personal credit has to be intact, especially if you got multiple owners, multiple founders. You want to make sure that's intact, because what banks want to see is, or once again, are you going to be able to afford to pay my money back, right? So if you got the revenue coming in, or if you can show that this is going to help create revenue, this can be a really good way to allow you to get funding, the right amount of funding that you need in order to keep a lot of the ownership within your company. Many small businesses use it. It's to cover initial startups, man. Listen, initial startup costs and just operational expenses, I think, is the biggest use of bank funding. And it kind of allows you, once again, because it goes into this aspect, like I said, everybody wants to be sexy and sweet when it comes down to the VC and investing raising. But really, it starts with asking yourself, do you even need capital, right? Can you really build this on your own? Can you scale this quick enough on your own? And like the answer to that question can help you figure out if, you know what I mean? Like if you really need to be getting investors, whether it's VC or getting some type of loan, whether it's through the banks, right? As I mentioned earlier, talking about the different stages, I think that's where this conversation gets interesting in, because there's so many different stages when it comes down to understanding like investing and like, what stage, which phase are you in, things of that nature. But The first thing, like I mentioned, is really considering your business needs, right? So before going to ask anybody for money, whether it's on the lending or the investing side, the very first thing is really to map out exactly what the hell you need at this point, because you always want to make it seem as if you're never going to ask for money again after this particular point, right? So if we are right here, so it's important to map out all of the things that you need at this particular point in order to, get the investments, like, that's going to justify why you need the investment money or why you need the infusion of capital. Whether it's staffing, marketing, you want to get a building, you want to get this, you want to get that, you need to pay for software, apps, whatever. Mapping all of that out so that way investors can understand exactly what the hell are you doing with my money. And I always say, put yourself in their shoes. If somebody was to ask you for $100,000, you will want to know those exact same questions, right? Like, what are you doing with it? When are you going to pay it back? Like, how long it's going to take? What actually do you do? Like, they really want to know, who have you got money from before? Like, they want to know, you would want to know all of those things. Those are the exact same things that they're looking for, because nobody's just about to willy-nilly just give you, a bunch of money to on an idea or a dream, right? And speaking of ideas, going into the business stages, you really have this thing called seed stage, which really is you got pre-seed and seed stage. This is ideally the idea round, right? I guess this is the idea phase where you're kind of still generating an idea, I guess, so much in the pre-seed stage, where you have an idea, a thought, a concept that makes sense, that could work, that could, be something. But you don't have a product yet. You don't really have a true product market fit yet. You don't have no revenue, anything like that. But you just got the concept. Now, there are a lot of investors, and I'll be able to share some links below, but also you'll be able to check out the website to see, schedule some time to talk more about this, but there are a lot of investors who invest in pre-seed stage companies, right? Once again, mainly a lot of angels, but also a lot of venture capital firms, consisting of a lot of angels, but a lot of them invest into these early, very, very, very early idea stage companies, which, that kind of helps, at least from that point, take that idea you got and try to manifest it, right? Try to add water to the seeds you've already planted, right? This is the idea of seed stage. But going into from pre-seed to more of the fully seed stage, this is where you kind of develop the concept. You kind of got some customer discoveries. You see that there's an actual issue that you're solving, but at the same time, you might have some revenue coming in already. So this is where the fully seed stage is, and there's a lot of investors that invest in this. This is kind of that sweet spot, I guess, to start out, because in this area of the early, I guess, seed stage is when you've already generated a little bit of revenue, but this is where VCs start to come in, and crowdfunding can be very helpful as well. But, you got a solid product market fit, right? You start to figure out your customers' needs and the discovery aspect of that. And then you have the later seed stage, or more of the growth stage within that aspect, is when you've mastered, I guess, the formula of what your customer's looking for. Now you're kind of ready to dive into the staffing, the operational stuff. You need funding to back a lot of things to help kind of continue this massive growth and rapidly grow, right? This is that late stages where you rapidly want to scale up. Strategic partnerships can also be an avenue in this aspect. So being able to just partner with other people in certain areas that you're missing, I think that's critical. But then you kind of dive into the series A, B, and C phases. This is where you have completely jumped into now expansion mode. You've developed the product already. You've mastered the customer discovery. Now you kind of want to just take everything and expand nationwide. You want to move to multiple different states. You want to have multiple different buildings. This is where the expansion comes in the series A, B, and C phases. This is where you get into the millions to $10 million ranges of deals done, mainly with venture capital somewhat, but this is where you kind of dive into private equity and things like that. Or bigger investors want to come in to the table, lead investors as angels. But this is that series A, B, and C phase, really when you go into expansion. If you're in this phase, you're highly attractive in a lot of, folks' eyes, because essentially you've been doing this a lot, you've been making a lot of revenue. Now you're just really going into expansion mode. And if your product is really, really, really good and it can be seen as somewhat of a unicorn, because everybody wants to be a unicorn, that's, you can't really do that. But you're seen as somewhat of a unicorn in a sense of you can possibly have a big kind of exit return for whoever's invested in you. So just knowing that those stages, the pre-seed, seed, pre-seed, regular seed, and then kind of the late seed going into series A, B, and C rounds, I think that's important. But I would say too, as we kind of tie everything back up, is I'm big on, if you're a client, if you've ever worked with me in any sense, I'm very big on preaching meet people where they are, right? So understanding, first of all, the first question is, do you even need to raise money? I think that's critical to ask because a lot of times, like I said, it's so sexy. Everybody wants to just raise money. But asking that question, and if the answer is yes, then understanding the types of investors or the type of lending you're looking for, because meeting people where they are is important. For instance, if you are in a SaaS business, right? If you're in more of the SaaS or ed tech, let's just use ed tech, it's more narrow. If you're in the ed tech industry, it makes absolutely no sense to reach out to a VC firm that is mainly in consumer goods, right? Not saying they won't invest into your idea, but the you would have to do more convincing and explaining to them what the hell ed tech is, because the area of specialization for them to fund companies is in this consumer goods, right? So just kind of knowing who you're talking to, because you want to make sure everything becomes, the word is intentional, right? You want to make sure everything is intentional because it cleans it up and it makes it a little bit clearer what the hell you want to do, right? So you don't want to just be out there doing anything and everything and just meeting with everybody. By all means, do that, but do it in a way where it's strategic enough to know where you're trying to get pointed to, right? You're trying to narrow down who is the right fit for you. One thing I did mention too, before we kind of dive into any more things, is the idea of pitch competitions and grant writing, right? Pitch competitions play a huge goddamn role in a lot of founders in the beginning. Being able to position yourself to go through incubators, go through different, whether it's a Black Ambition Fund, whether it's the TechCrunch thing, your local incubators might have their own thing. I know out here we have demo days and our entrepreneurship weeks, high stakes pitch. So being able to take advantage of that, because the biggest value of pitch competitions is you get a chance to practice how to pitch your goddamn company. Now it is a competition, so you have to be competing against other founders in that same cohort, same time. But being able to have practice on how to pitch is critical, because it kind of gets you kind of comfortable. And then you're going to be pitching in front of a bunch of people, right? So that is critical. And then most of the time, a lot of times you get non-diluted funds from these pitch competitions if you do win. Sometimes you have a little, whether it's a safe investment and things of that nature. You kind of dive into those details in another video. But whether it's those type of investments, whether it's convertible notes and things like that, that might be nuanced, but most of the time it's non-dilutive, meaning that it doesn't dilute any of the equity you have. You still maintain 100% at this point if you still have 100% of your company. But pitch competition is big, but so is grant writing. Depending on the type of industry that you're in, I think it's critical to understand grant writing, because if you provide a certain type of service or product, that there might be some grants available for you. Now, grants is huge because it's federally funded, locally funded, or state funded, right? So it allows you to kind of get some free capital, so to speak. But you have to do some work for it. It's not easy. You really have to put some time into convincing folks that, you deserve this grant, and understanding the actual area you're trying to apply for this grant in. Because if you don't know, then you know what I'm saying? Once again, if you're not intentional, you're going to be all over the place. But wrapping that up and going back to just the key things to look for is understanding how to meet people where they are, understanding what type of investors you need to be looking for within your industry, making sure it makes sense to them, because if not, it's going to be hard. You're going to really try to convince them how they're going to be able to support you, right? But you want to make sure like it's an area where you're getting more than just capital too. You want to make sure you get resources, because being connected to somebody that has been in your field and knows the context to get you to that next level, I think is equally as valuable as them just giving you money. So just making sure you understand what you're looking for. But make sure you got damn numbers, make sure the numbers match up and look good. People be throwing numbers. I've seen tons of pitch decks. People just be throwing goddamn numbers all over the place, and you just don't know where they come from, right? But being able to make sure your numbers look good and everything add up and match up. There's a lot of different consulting firms out there that kind of deal with that part of it. We're here at the Clever Group. That's one of the biggest things we do, is act as that fractional CFO to make sure you are prepared to talk to them. But there are many different other folks that do just as good of a job getting to the deeper dive of your numbers. But making sure you reach out to somebody in that aspect to make sure your numbers are clean. Because if you go into a meeting with an investor, I know this because I've talked to my uncle and we had this conversation a while back. It's like, hey, if you meet with a goddamn investor and your numbers don't look good, I mean, you just probably ruined everything, right? Especially when you're just throwing things up there. It just kind of looks like you don't know what you're doing. So you want to make sure you don't mess up that, because I know the financial part of any conversation with investors is the more crucial one. And really, one of the last things, I guess, in this aspect is just pitching, preparing to pitch, right? So being able to understand how to pitch is important, but telling a compelling story, I think it starts there. You have to be able to tell a story and sell yourself, right? You're selling yourself. And I put it to you like this with every client I work with. You're not selling a product or service, right? You're selling a solution. right? If you can pitch yourself and understand how you're selling a solution, how you're solving a problem, that helps people attract to what you're trying to do, right? Because sometimes people invest in you literally because you have a mission that means something. It's impactful, right? They're going to be doing whatever they can to help you get there. This area of pitching, though, whenever it's preparing, like, avoid being too technical, because lots of times you got some overly technical folks, because you got the technical founders, and it's like, hey, man, you're an engineer, or you are a pharmacist, or you are in the medical field, or like, nobody really understands the jargon. Just tell me like the simplistics of it, right? So being able to get rid of most of the technical jargon, or like really underestimating your competition. Lots of times people would say like, we don't have any competition. That's a fucking lie. Like, somebody's competing with you in some aspect, right? So you got to be able to understand who's really like your competition and acknowledging that, right? But you always want to make sure you always bump yourself up in the sense of like, you're doing this better than them, right? And don't be vague about financials. Once again, like when you talk about finances, talk about what you know, stick to what you know. Don't put yourself in a hole where you kind of got to dig yourself out because you start talking, way too much more than you need to, because now investors are going to have more questions. But all in all, man, when it comes down to just fundraising, going through this whole process, these are the main things to just, keep up with and understand off top, right? And like I mentioned, please leverage professional help. Your advisory board becomes your best friends in some aspects, because like, hey, those are a lot of things that people on your advisory boards can give to you, right? And working with partner in law firms from a legal standpoint, financial planning firms, myself, like what we do with the Clever Group is a big example of that. You have a lot of other folks that do a lot of other great things, but just figuring out how to connect with professionals, right, to help guide you and take one less head off your head is what I always preach. But anyway, to wrap everything up, man, I think understanding all of these, we discussed a ton of different funding types that are available and how to choose the right one for your business, steps to prepare for your business, just essential things to continue to do, like networking and things like that. I would say like evaluate all your funding needs. To wrap this up, like explore the options we just discussed and start preparing your plan, your pitch deck, working with the right people to get you right there. And remember, like just the right funding source in itself can propel your business to new heights that you never even imagined. But it's all about being intentional about who you're going to meet with, and also having that plan that's going to be outlined to understand it, right? But it all starts with the first question, though. You know what I mean? Do you even need investors? Right? Maybe you just need support. Maybe you just need somebody to kind of get advice from. So get those folks, right? So understanding that you might not always need the funding, but if you do, these are the areas you can do, right? These are the areas you can go down. But in the meantime, man, thank you guys for joining me on another episode of the People's Planner Podcast. I hope y'all enjoyed this one. I think this one is going to be beautiful. I feel more free now. You know what I mean? I feel more free as I start talking about this. I feel more comfortable as I'm getting more in tune in this industry, and I love everything about it. But feel free to like, share, subscribe, also comment, man. Let me know what y'all think about a lot of these things. Let me know what advice, what other, thoughts you might have on this topic that I might have missed. Feel free to follow me on social media at the Clever Group on Instagram and on Facebook. So being able to stay in touch, and being able to subscribe, also subscribe to the website, www.the-clevergroup.com. So that way you kind of can stay up to date with a lot of newsletters we're going to start releasing very soon. Kind of, stay in tune with what we got going on. But in the meantime, once again, man, I really, really appreciate you guys. And we'll be back here with the next video. I'll let you guys know when that comes out. But you all know how the motto goes. Always be clever. I'm out.